Yes.
Kia ora everybody. Ko Nicole Rosie takuinga, ko tūnanga a kiwa, aho. So I'm Gisborne Girl, and yes, I'm here to talk, I guess, about the Westminster system, but I thought I'd talk because I've just come into MPI, and before joining WorkSafe, I was actually in Fonterra, and you know, MPI has a bit to do with Fonterra, and when you go onto Fonterra sites, you sanitise your feet as well as your hands, and any of you that came in the front door and there's that pedal, I assumed that was for the feet, so I was standing on the pedal as the so I'm fully sanitised. So that's very, very MPI-ish, isn't it? They're doing my feet as well as my hands. But anyway, but I'm here to talk about the Westminster system and how it affects, in my view, the public sector. You know, coming from the private sector into the public sector, I think I have a bit of a unique view. But I also come from a very leadership coaching background. So I wanted to start to help you get the insight rather than me give you the insight with a bit of a question for you. And that question is, what do you think the attributes of a hierarchical culture are? Feel free to yell out.
Permission seeking.
Yep. So you ask for permission. Yep. What else?
Power-based.
Power. Yep. All about power.
You're always trying to please the person above you.
Yep.
Top-down vertical.
Yep.
Command and control.
Vertical. Clearly not a teacher. Yep. Any other thoughts? How does it feel for people when the...
Disempowering.
Yep.
Don't like power. Restrictive.
What about waterfall in terms of the way they work?
Yeah, waterfall. That's a good way to put it. Yep.
Old-fashioned?
Yep. And that's it. I was trying to spell waterfall, sorry. So, yeah, good, you know, maybe you can spell words. I think that's right, but very fit for the time, because we were in a society where we had a lot of manufacturing processes and other things. Where actually, you know, we were trying to design widgets all the same way and actually having a command and control structure and a lot of processes when the hierarchical system we've all been in was established was very fit for purpose, right? So for the time it was fit for purpose. Now, so can you tell me what a coaching culture would be or a leader-led culture? What would the attributes of that be? I just put coaching there because I think that helps.
Enabling?
Yep.
Or collaborative?
Yep.
Maximising potential.
How do you get there though? These are all words, but what happens in this culture with the leader? This one, you ask for permission.
Ask for feedback.
Sorry?
Ask for feedback and permission.
Keep going. What happens on, that's not right really.
It's kind of invisible leadership.
Yeah.
Coaching. It's not Superman called
Yeah.
leadership. It's
You're here to enable. Yeah.
Mutually respectful.
Yes, roles are equivalent. I'm just rephrasing that to roles are equivalent if that's all right. Yeah, but you're mutually respectful, that's another way to say it. Anything else about that?
Something about trust. Trust.
Yep. Trust. Okay. So I'm going to start there and then I'm going to go, what are the attributes of the Westminster system? What do we see play out? And this is not intended to be political, right? But what do we see play out of the Westminster system? We have a coalition, but we have parties. How do they play?
Adversarial.
Very adversarial, right? So Westminster system. Adversarial. How do you get your one up in the Westminster system?
That's on other people.
You make others look bad.
Yeah.
It's all about reputation. Would that be right? Anything else anybody wanted to say about a Westminster system? It's
Blame.
democratic,
Blame
so everybody
culture.
has their say.
A blame culture, when something goes wrong, head has to roll.
Yep, blame. Attribution, I'll just say attribute.
Not always looking long term.
It's always looking.
It's not always.
A 3-year term. It's like, well, our one is a 3-year term, right? There's also fighting, wasn't there? There's sort of a little bit in there.
Show pony.
Show pony, okay.
It's inclusive and exclusive.
Explain that one a little.
Well, I'm trying to think of the good things about it as well.
It's democratic, right?
Yeah,
so
we
people
lost
get to
democratic. I
have,
think we need to say
people get to
democratic.
have
Yeah,
their
if we
vote.
say that, it's fine.
Yeah, it's got some strengths. It's been very enduring, right? None of these are wrong or right? They just are, right? Now I'm going to give you an overlay of what's happened in the world in the last, well, it's been happening for a while, but certainly in the last 5 years it's accelerating, and COVID has accelerated on steroids. And that is the problems of the world are now becoming much, much more complex and much, much more, whereas they were at an organisational or even an individual level, they're now happening at a system and world level. COVID's a very good example of that, but environmental change, sustainability, waterways, you start thinking of the problems that New Zealand has, and they are no longer solvable at a local, individual, organisational level. So COVID-19 has highlighted very clearly that the way we've led in the past is not the way we will be successful leading in the future. And I was at Singularity University last year. It's the university in the United States. It's looking at all the exponential change that's about to hit the world, across energy, across biodiversity, across a whole lot of dimensions. And what's really clear is there's a whole lot of exponential change coming. You're seeing it a little bit with your cell phones and other things, but that's going to happen in lots and lots of different places and accelerate. The culture that we have is not very fit for an exponential world. It's slow, it's adversarial, it's hierarchical, all the power sits with one or two people. So this is actually also very technically based. You often get to the top through technical expertise. This is leadership based often. So you get to the top through your ability, your empathy, your ability to understand others, your connection, your ability to bring people together, different focus, different strengths. So this model where individuals or a few individuals could make decisions on behalf of an organisation or, in our case, a government, and do that in a way that got an effective outcome, it's been demonstrated to be increasingly irrelevant in a modern world. And those organisations that are surviving are very much moving to agile, they're dynamically changing the way they work, they're involving and collaborating broadly, including with their competitors and others to make themselves successful in this modern world. And here we are, tracked as public service in the Westminster system. Which of these two do you think the Westminster system looks more like? And in fact, it's almost that on steroids, because in this system we don't actually fire people for reputational issues in the hierarchical system, right? So we would be having conversations and telling them they're stupid, but in the Westminster system it actually results in even bigger consequences, right? So this is a problem, and the way that this plays out, because down here you've got a changing population in New Zealand. You've got a young group of people coming up. They're not interested in this hierarchy of the past. In fact, the way we're educating our children is completely different. I've got 4 children, by the way. 14, 12, 11, 9. I change all the time, so it's like, get them wrong. And, you know, the way they're being educated, the things they're learning at school, the skill sets they're getting are more in this, increasingly in this space. Less in this, and those people are coming into our workforce. There's a few young people in the room here. They're far more, equipped on with their IT and with their web presence, and they're really much in this space. They're collaborating. They're getting information from multiple sources. My son tells me all about North Korea at the age of 10. They are far more technically knowledgeable than we ever were. So the world has changed from power sitting with a few technical experts nobody else knew, to power sitting with many people, and information being used in multiple different ways, and exponential change going on. So this is getting outdated, and the populations, even us that have been in these paradigms for most of our career, are getting increasingly disconnected from the culture. And the way we see that is increasing incidents of bullying. You know, did we not have bullying in the past under this one?
Yeah, a lot of it.
Do we ever think of it as bullying? Do we not have sexual harassment in the past? Do we think of it as sexual harassment? The paradigm has changed significantly. We've literally, in 10 or 20 years, fundamentally changed what is acceptable in society and the type of behaviours and the type of way we work. We've almost done it by, you know, because we have to, but without realising what's actually going on. And this disconnect, where actually a lot of the people that have got to the top of organisations, it's not unique to the public sector, although there seems to be, in my view, a higher predominance of it within the public sector, have got there because of technical skills, their ability to operate effectively in command and control. And be very clear, if you're in crisis, command and control is really important. If you're in peacetime, it's not. So right now, command and control is really, really important. A number of our agencies need a kind of command and control capability. And when you're in the middle of a critical policing incident, I don't think having collaboration and asking everybody, what should I do here, is the right answer, as someone's got a gun to your head, right? But actually, for 99% of the work we do, we're not in those extreme conditions. Yet a lot of what we've built our frameworks on is that. So it is a big shift for the public sector, with this still sitting over the top of us, to move here, which is really, this is just some of the behaviours, there's a whole lot of other behaviours, collaboration, working with others, you know, looking outside yourself to find solutions, collaborating across teams, collaborating across organisations, working public-private. These are all the things that you saw in COVID. These are all the things Singularity said have to happen to solve complex issues, and the public sector has found it really hard to do it. And it will remain hard because we're still, you know, driven from this with a lot of our core leadership and frameworks built around this. So that's all a bit depressing, isn't it? But, you know, the reality is we are the people that can change it. First of all, you're at this session, which means you're interested in being a leader or changer of the future. Second of all, there's leaders, increasingly leaders within the public sector, I think, who understand this and are rapidly trying to change the organisations, even though they're competing often against this. You realise it's quite a big reputational risk to start changing your structures and managing our technical leadership or changing that, because you know what happens. You end up in the media and all of those things as you try to change people. So this is not easy from a leadership challenge perspective to change within the construct we operate in. But I think there is a very big commitment from a number of the public sector leadership to start to change towards this. And look, you will be part of that. And you have to be part of that, because this is actually going to be led by the generation behind us, not this generation. We're probably too fixed, and God, I feel like I'm old. I'm not that old, by the way. But we're probably too fixed in the models of success of the past to be able to truly design the models of success for the future. So it has to be collaborative. And we have to engage the youth and the new people coming through and those to actually change the public sector towards a highly adaptable, connected, collaborative, both within ourselves but out with the private sector. And look, bullying and all those things that you're seeing, which are parts, I think, of, it's more common in the public sector for that to be seen, as certainly from my experience. They're all a sign that there's a cultural clash going on. And actually that we're changing. You know, I'll just talk briefly about bullying, because I managed that, of course, trying to set up the whole bullying and harassment framework within WorkSafe. And I think it is really a difficult issue. Now, at one end of the spectrum, there is clearly unacceptable behaviour, which is your sexual harassment, any physical violence, completely unacceptable behaviour. The other end of the spectrum is people engaged in normal conversations or things that might happen as part of their job, i.e. they might be in a performance review discussion, they don't like what they're hearing. I mean, I get that it might not have been done perfectly, but it's a one-off event and it is not bullying and harassment. But in the middle, there is a whole lot of behaviours that happen. Some of it sitting in these categories that, depending on your value system, where you come from, will be perceived as bullying by some people, harassment by some people, and you know, there's a disconnect between the values that we're working on. And this is very, very complex because bullying can demonise the person claimed to be a bullier who may have got to their successful point in their career for all the reasons sitting on this board. And then we're suddenly telling them those are the same reasons why you're now a baddie. And on the other side of the equation, it can victimise the person that's bullied, who then has to explain it, has to go in front of multiple people, has to put it in writing. So it is a very complex issue. But at the heart of solving that issue is not focusing on bullying and harassment. The heart of solving that issue is actually getting much more effective leadership happening, and taking a culture forward in a unified, joined up way so people understand the culture of the future, the culture of an organisation. So I'm going to stop by then going, so what do you do when you get into a leadership role? So there's three things that I think that I'm focusing on in Waka Kotahi, which is the New Zealand Transport Agency. There's only three things that the executive and board do. One is strategy, and obviously you want to make sure that's being executed. Two is risk and assurance, and third is culture. That's all you focus on in the leadership of an organisation. You can't change your culture towards the future if you're not really clear on your strategy. What are you changing it towards? It may well be that you do emergency management and you need to be in hierarchical leadership all the time. And that is quite a different strategy and culture than, say, what we need at Waka Kotahi and most of the public sector needs. So you need a strategy, and from that you can then focus heavily on culture. And in Waka Kotahi, there's two things we're focusing on this year. One is the middle leadership level and the senior leadership level and leadership behaviours, because this is the group of people that have got to the top, who most influence the behaviour of the organisation from a people management perspective, and they are the ones that often need the most support to change. So we're focused there. It's not meaning they're bad, it's meaning we're supporting and enabling them to lead in a modern and different world. And the other area we're focused on is values and our values, and doing that bottom up with the organisation, having joined up views of what is a good culture, what is a set of values that we can own as an organisation, and the behaviours that are associated with that. So common understanding of what are acceptable behaviours. And if you think that through, once you've got that shared understanding, you're much more able to deal with things like inappropriate behaviour, bullying, harassment, because there is a shared language on what is acceptable for the organisation.
Hei tu hono he tikanga paina te aroha aue. Ka pau te manawa, whitirere tonu ake nā, te rangi Māori nā te rangi Māori Ia wehi. Kia ora. E te kai whakahaere tēnā koe, e te kai kōrero tēnā koe. Rauranga tērā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's so rare to come into a forum like this and to have the Western system decoded by the other treaty partner. So you said that about yourselves. And to be able to show, actually physically, that in order to bring our Māori into the public service, we really need to do some restructuring to create the actual space for my culture to live and to be alive. So I sing to you, yes I do. Very important waiata that one for me, because it's a tribal one. And it's written by one of our fabulous composers, very strong woman who, going into a context where not chosen to be one of the speakers, she of course found a way to use the oral arts to do a speech anyway. So that was a sung speech. Every element of that song is a component from a whai kōrero. How clever is that? So here I am, happily today, apologies for being late. I'm clearly not as fit as I thought I was. So, whereas I thought it would take me X number of minutes to get here, it took me a few more and I arrived puffing. So, not a good look. But I am fit for purpose for this presentation. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm descended from both treaty partners, because I love them both. I'm credentialed in them both. In fact, I've got a pile of degrees. It's actually this high. I've got 7. That's no bullshit. The last one's a certificate, but it's, it's on the way. Because, in our world, it's so hard to be believed, so hard to be taken seriously, even though the evidence is right in front of us. So we have to go back 100 years to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who in 1914, the 6th eldest child of 19, born in 1899, decided as a young Mormon woman in Nuhaka that she wanted a different future for herself. The Presbyterians had just arrived in town, and the clever Presbyterians sent women. My young grandmother looked at these women and thought, you are representing that church? I'm having whatever's in your water, I'm having some of that. They came with secondary school opportunities in a school on the other side of New Zealand called Te Tiriti O Waitangi Girls College. And in order to get access to that school, and there were very few secondary school options available for a Māori woman from Nuhaka in 1914, she had to change her religion. Guess what she did? 15 years old makes that decision, education is going to change my life and I'm having it. 15 years old says, I'm changing, sorry mum and dad, whānau mā, I love being a Mormon but I need to be a Presbyterian, so converted her religion. And in 1915 started as the 149th pupil at Te Tiriti O Waitangi Girls College. 2 years later was the Ducks. 3 years later was teaching in the Presbyterian Mission Service. 1918 was her first appointment in Waiaho. Fast forward 100 years, and the great-grandchild named after her is graduating Master of Law at Harvard University. With that name, Horiana, from her great-grandmother, and we had to barter for that name, and I'll tell you why. Fulbright scholar, Ngārimu scholar, the words Rākai Pāka and Ngāti Parau in the Harvard University graduation book, I'm sitting in the 3rd row. George Bush Sr. gets an honorary doctorate that day. Ella Fitzgerald does too. And she's at a grand piano singing the American anthem. And she just hits these bars and goes, oh hey, and holds the note for goodness knows how long. There isn't a person in that graduation ceremony that isn't crying, us included. Took 100 years to go from Nuhaka to Harvard. And what did it really take? It took vision, it took courage, and it took utter guts and determination. My grandmother's account of living as a woman before her time is really almost overwhelming. She married my grandfather, who was born in the Orkney Islands, came to New Zealand as a young boy, became a fluent speaker of Māori, in fact so fluent that when the Māori Bible was revised in the 1950s, Sirapira Ngata asked my Orkney Islands grandfather to chair the committee that led that revision. Such was his commitment to living with our people in a genuinely partnership-informed way. They gave their lives to the vision of the Treaty of Waitangi, to creating a society that our ancestors saw, both treaty partners' ancestors saw in 1840, something that they were courageous enough to sign up to. And do we have that courage today? Are we signed up today to what our ancestors, both sides, not just mine, both sides, both sets of ancestors of the treaty saw a future for New Zealand that did not exist anywhere in the world, and they were prepared to sign up to it? Would we sign up to it today? I know I would, because I've benefited from it. Obviously, I've got a daughter who went to Harvard. She's 33 years old and she's already formed her own law firm. She scares the hell out of me. Of course, I wanted those things for our kids, but they're actually doing it. And her son, I only have one grandchild, he lives in Otaki, so guess where I live? I work in Wellington and I live in Kotahi. I live around the corner from my grandchild because he can go to school to eat his lunch. We'll do everything else. Okay? And I'm a trained educator. I said pilot degrees in education this big. So much about this said to my grandmother, how dare you? How dare you? In fact, they didn't even have a place for her. She wasn't even at the bottom of the board. She wasn't on the board. Because the future for a Māori girl in 1914, not far out of the kitchen, even if you got in there. So we have in this society still the opportunity to build a nation based on the Treaty of Waitangi that could lead the world in the way that we did, actually in signing the treaty and giving women the vote, in that fabulous nuclear-free policy we developed. And in our COVID response, we could still go there, but we are not there yet. And one of the things that I have done, of course, is I have a presentation for you, which I've sung to, so I can email you that. And what it is it's an intervention logic for treaty-based organisational transformation in the public sector. It's kind of my life's work. And I'm happy to share it with you as a way of us as public servants actually understanding our own history. So, you know this, in 1975, the State Services Commission called for a review of Māori affairs, and Karako Kotahi was appointed to lead it in 1976. And what he did is he went in and he said, we're going to turn that on its head, and that's what he did. He did that in 1976 in a review of Māori affairs that 2 or 3 years later created a whole series of work programs called Tū Tangata, out of which came Kohanga Reo, Rapumahi, Mātua Whāngai, Kōkiri centres. I say these things in public sector forums, and 95% of the people I'm talking to don't know what I'm talking about. So one of our key principles from the Māori world is whakapapa. You've got to know who you are and you've got to know where you came from, including in the public service. Another key thing from our world is whanaungatanga. You know, there's 6 degrees of separation in America. There sure as hell ain't in New Zealand. I'm telling you, you're lucky if there's 2. And that's absolutely fabulous because it's about heart. It's about connection. You know, you read the research on addiction. And the antidote to addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And so Portugal, as a jurisdiction that had one of the worst drug use problems in the world, sorted it through connection. We call that whakawhanaungatanga. So somebody rings me on Sunday night because they're about to go into a performance review, and they know that what's going on is that the manager has been told, find an issue and performance review her out. Because that stuff she wants to do with Māori development is too fast. She's not being realistic. She doesn't understand what we have to deal with. And that might be possible in 50 years' time, but it ain't going to be possible now. Get her out. I can tell you the number of times I have people. So I'm 6 months away from retirement, been in the game since 1974. As a student of education, so engaged in systemic change and understanding how you can create possibilities for Māori for a good 40 years now. The people who've come to me broken by this, but what is also part of the salvation and why we still have a future in treaty-based intervention and change and organisational modelling based on it in this country, is actually I live in 2 worlds. So I work over here at the moment on secondment to the Office of the Children's Commission, and I live in the Māori world over here. Get on the train in the morning, come back over here. And so in my PhD, which is called Māori Education from Wretchedness to Hope, the theoretical model of how Māori and Aotearoa have resisted colonisation like no other Indigenous communities of the world is because we did it our way. And so one of the notions that that body of work develops is called border crossing. Because when I was a student in the mid-70s coming through, there was a French sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu who wrote about cultural capital. And he was a god. He seriously was a god. If you knew Bourdieu off by heart, you got an A+. So I learnt Bourdieu, reading. One of my colleagues went to France to kind of have a sabbatical around Bourdieu, and he didn't speak French, so Bourdieu didn't even want to kind of have coffee with him because he was an Anglophone, you know. I could have suggested to him before he went that bilingualism was important to more than just the Maoris in Aotearoa, but never mind. So I'm reading Bourdieu and going, right, gotcha, I can theorise failure, excellent. Maoris go into the school system, we've got a different culture, we fail because that's how it works. You either assimilate into Pākehā terms, lose who you are, change your culture to be successful, or you fail. Great, got it. That's not my grandmother, that's not my mother. That's not Tilly Reedy, that's not Tamati Reedy, it's not actually Joan Metch either. Has to be something else going on. So, you know, as a young student, you don't tell anybody that you think you're doing a critique of Bourdieu, because why would you? As a young Māori student at Massey University, you're going to do a critique of Bourdieu, so you just get on with it, because the theory actually is not making sense in terms of what you know about the world. Note to self, to the public service. 16% of public servants in 2016, according to the State Services Commission, were Māori. 8% of the managers were Māori. So you've got kind of a population base in the public service reporting up to people of a different culture, in a different power structure. So the ability to bring Māori ideas and knowledge through in this is very difficult. But I'm sitting there at that time as a student saying to myself, okay, so here's the thing. That theory is actually just wrong. It might be okay, you can explain failure like that, but it's not sophisticated enough to explain success. And that's one of the lessons for us in Aotearoa as well, is that we actually have global leadership in the Indigenous space because our people will not accept ways of working that othered us and crushed us and smashed us into some kind of pool of victims at the bottom of a colonisation heap. We had alternative realities that we still believed in and we still invested in. One of my colleagues used to work in Australia with the Kuri community. And he said, you don't want to come to New Zealand? There's some interesting things about you Māori people. You don't want to be like anyone else. You seem to be happy being like who you are. When a lot of the modelling in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s was about, you know, and I'm a card-carrying feminist, and I've seen this in the women's development movement as well. You want to get ahead, you can cut your hair off, you wear a grey suit, you have a white shirt, and I've been in interviews where I'm thinking, I can't be 100% sure of the gendered nature of the panel I'm being interviewed by until I look at the shoes. That's a good sign. So there's some ways in which systems of power come down on people who are involved in them that have parallels. But what's different for Māori is we do have a treaty, and we have ways of understanding the world and offering solutions to the world that are actually life-saving. So if we understand that this is how the Westminster system has worked, and it's not actually delivering in a global context the social, the economic, the cultural change we need, what's the risk really in doing some Indigenous modelling? Because actually with us, the bar's pretty low when you look at Māori outcomes. The bar's pretty low in terms of what we are as public servants achieving. How big a risk is it to engage in partnership and say, can we have a talk about some real power sharing and what might actually be an alternative way of understanding how to deliver something in a care and protection space, for example, where I'm working right now, that looks a little more humane than a 19-year-old mother being on a birthing table, in labour, in the maternity annex, baby is engaged and Crown officials walk in, 1 statutory social worker, 3 police to uplift the baby at birth. I think if that had actually happened to somebody like Hillary Clinton, you know, a rich white woman, or perhaps even not so rich, there'd be a whole different understanding about it. But we're now seeing things come through about treatment of young Māori women, treatment of young Māori men, and I'm not yet in America in the Black Lives Matter movement. I haven't left home. I know what happens to our people at home. That say to us there has to be another way. And of course, one of the things that I do here as a historian in the public policy space is to say we actually have some wonderful lessons in New Zealand where we've done these things before. So our CEOs don't need to think, oh my God, if I go there, it's a precedent like really a dangerous, risky precedent. We have so many precedents in our history that we don't know about, that one of the first things we can do to create real change is to know our history and own it. And the second thing is to be able to embrace the treaty in a loving way, to see it as the beautiful, beautiful framing that it is for new possibilities, and then to create some actual space without wanting to fill it. Because that's what we often do. We need to have space to engage with Māori. We're going to create a big space there, and then we all rush in and we go, right, and when we engage and consult with it, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to do all of it, and the space is filled. To create the space, to stand aside, and to have the courage as a nation to say, in that space, what comes next, surely to goodness, can't be any worse than what's already happening. 69% about of 18 to 25 Māori men in prison have been through SIFs and have lived in state care. Not a good indicator of successful outcome. How hard would it be to have partnership with iwi in that space, in a traditional Māori informed, but it can't be worse. So we still belong to the greatest place on earth to develop Indigenous modelling and to enable a conversation of the kind our people saw when we signed it in 1840 to happen. Lots of people like me have been born into whānau, where our ancestors said, you see that for us? Awfully sorry. We see this. And had the courage and the determination and all of the other things you want to say, the skills, the intelligence, not only to engage, but to pull it off. You know, there's a journal account of a Presbyterian mission sister who was in the room when my grandparents met. So my grandfather was a really handsome dude. I mean, he's drop dead gorgeous. I've got such a dish, such a babe. And apparently when they met, according to this diary account, my grandmother, whatever she thought at the first meeting, you know, was really cool. It's like, yeah, what did you've got all of that going on, and I've got all of this going on. 3 years later, they're married. In a biracial marriage in 1921, 5 children. My mother is the 4th child. She was a teacher, my mother's a teacher, my father's a teacher, my brother and sister are teachers, and I'm a teacher, and I wished I was a lawyer, but my daughter is so cute. Thank you, and I hope I've shared something with you. You'll get the paper. It'll be emailed through.